When you can't make it to City Hall or the school board meetings, local journalists from Duluth News Tribune will be there to report the facts and get your questions answered. Local news works for you. Stay up to date at duluthnewstribune.com.
Hello, Northlanders. It's Tuesday, October 10th. I'm Wyatt Buckner with your Duluth News Tribune Minute, presented by Minnesota Power Employees Credit Union.
The average MPECU member saves over $785 a year in better rates and lower fees. And with MPECU, every ATM is your ATM. With their free checking program, you get ATM fee reimbursements at any ATM anywhere in the U.S. Check out Minnesota Power Employees Credit Union services online at mpecu.com or visit their offices in downtown Duluth, Arrowhead Road, or Miller Trunk Highway.
Now here's a look at today's headlines. As Hermantown continues to grow, its fire department is evolving too. Hermantown announced in a news release Monday it has hired Zach Graves as its first full-time paid fire chief. Graves has been a member of the Hermantown Volunteer Fire Department for 12 years and just recently retired from the 140th Fighter Wing of the Minnesota Air National Guard, where he served more than 26 years, finishing his career there as fire chief and chief master sergeant at the Duluth Military Base. The fire department annually receives about 1,200 calls for service, relying on a team of 20 volunteers to respond. For more than 70 years, Hermantown has relied on an all-volunteer fire department, but now it's shifting to a hybrid model of paid and unpaid members. Under its new model, the Hermantown Fire Department will pay a small stipend to a couple members per night who agree to be scheduled on call from 5 p.m. to 7 a.m. to respond to medical calls. He said all volunteers also will carry pagers that allow for a mass call when a larger response is necessary. Graves hopes the new model will reduce volunteer burnout and could also be useful to improve recruiting efforts. At present, any volunteer firefighters available respond to all calls in Hermantown. Hermantown Police Chief Jim Crace, who has endorsed a hybrid fire department, will now oversee both police and fire operations as he moves into a new position as Director of Public Safety for the city. The reconfigured Hermantown Fire Department will have 2 full-time paid employees as it looks to fill another position as Fire Inspector Training Officer as well. Information about the job is available at hermantownmn.com/careers. The head of a prominent personal injury law firm was intoxicated and acknowledged taking sleeping pills before injuring a construction worker in a hit-and-run crash Friday, authorities said. James Patrick Carey, 64, was arraigned Monday morning on 4 charges in the Interstate 35 collision near Hinckley. The president and managing partner of Simon Carey was expected to be released from custody a short time later, having spent the weekend in the Pine County Jail. Carey, according to a criminal complaint, claimed he was not aware he hit the worker, though he acknowledged leaving the scene, and authorities said he showed signs of impairment. The complaint says the worker, Joseph Gregory Flanagan, 27 of Duluth, was wearing a high-visibility vest and had just finished removing cones from one of the northbound lanes. He was walking on a dirt shoulder toward his truck when he was clipped by the passenger vehicle around 11:40 a.m. A trooper who arrived on the scene found tire marks indicating a car had driven onto the shoulder before correcting back onto the road. The complaint says pieces of a side mirror also were found on the shoulder, with a part number identifying it as belonging to a 2016 GMC Acadia. At least 2 witnesses also told troopers that they saw the collision. One motorist said the vehicle had been driving onto the shoulder to pass slower traffic in the construction zone, according to the complaint. A Carleton County Sheriff's deputy found a matching Acadia with a missing passenger side mirror near Moose Lake a short time later. Officers wrote that Carey, the driver, had an odor of alcohol and bloodshot, watery eyes. The complaint states that Carey said he had not been sleeping due to a death in the family and had taken sleeping pills. Authorities wrote that he showed signs of impairment in field sobriety tests and agreed to a preliminary breath test, quote, but was not blowing properly, end quote. A manual capture resulted in a reading of 0.12, while a later attempt at a breath test resulted in a 0.143 blood alcohol concentration. The legal limit for driving in Minnesota is 0.08. A warrant was obtained for a blood draw, and a sample was sent to the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension for analysis. The Pine County Attorney's Office charged Carey of Edina with 3 gross misdemeanors, 2 counts of criminal vehicular operation, and 1 of failing to stop for a traffic collision resulting in bodily harm, along with a misdemeanor count of 4th-degree driving while impaired. Judge Jason Steffen granted Carey release with conditions including no alcohol or substance use and a requirement to comply with random testing. Alternatively, he said the attorney could post a $6,000 bond without conditions. His next court appearance was set for December 28th. Now Dan Williamson joins us with a special guest.
Thank you very much, Wyatt. I'm joined by one of our colleagues, the great Jay Gabler, Duluth News Tribune arts and entertainment reporter. And Jay is working on a story that we'll be able to see in Wednesday's print edition of the Duluth News Tribune. And Jay, you were saying this is a story about the first production in a new Duluth performance space. What more can you tell us?
It is a new space in a very familiar location. So this is a new space operated by the Duluth Playhouse, is called The Lab, and it is within the North Shore Theater complex. So if you know where the North Shore Theater is, you're used to walking in the doors and you go to that big auditorium, and that's what you know as the North Shore Theater. But if you imagine standing on Superior Street, looking at those doors, and you take a couple steps to your right, just right there, it's an old storefront, and it's being converted into a black box performance space. That means basically, literally what it sounds like. It's just a box-shaped space, and they paint it black to avoid any distractions for the, performances. And it can be used in flexible ways to stage shows. They can kind of move the seating around, move the set around, whatever works to fit a show within that little black box. And the seating capacity is very limited. There are only 45 seats per performance of Misery, performance opening this Thursday at the Lab.
What was your biggest takeaway from this story?
Well, one takeaway that I have to share with our listeners right off the bat, usually with a piece like this, you describe the, production, you say it's coming up, and you say, okay, well, here's how you get tickets if you're interested. Well, in this case, people are already so interested that before it was even the month of October, every single ticket to every single scheduled performance of this show, Misery, has been sold. So there are no tickets available for this show. People were very interested. Obviously, it's based on a Stephen King novel. There was that popular movie in 1990, so people know this story. It's a big draw. It's spooky season, so the tickets are gone. But, I was lucky to be able to see a rehearsal, and I'm going to check out the show itself and write a review so you can read about it that way. But I guess a takeaway that I had was just how excited the artists are to have this space. And there will be many more shows in this space. So if you missed out on a ticket to Misery, don't worry, there will be more this season alone. They've got a show coming up called Constellations that'll be in April. And then there's the What She Said Festival of New Plays coming up later next spring. So if you want to see the space, there are tickets available, just not for Misery.
For our audience out there, what do you hope they take away from the story?
Well, I hope that people realize how much care is going into this production, how excited the artists are to have this new space and be putting this piece on. And, I hope they understand what an incredible performing arts scene we have here, and that there is demand for these shows that these artists are putting on. If there is something that sounds interesting to you, do not delay and get those tickets, because I know we're in Duluth. I know it's not Minneapolis, it's not New York, but there is a growing audience for the increasing amount of performing art that is happening here in Duluth. And you're going to start seeing, I think, more and more sellouts as time goes on. Philip Fazio, who's the producing artistic director at Duluth Playhouse, says, you know what? Constellations and the What She Said Festival are also going to sell out. So his advice is, if you're interested in getting to see this space and getting to experience theater up close, well, get your tickets now. And I also will say, I did talk to the artists who are involved in this production of Misery and asked them, okay, so if someone is reading this feature and is a little bit disappointed they couldn't get tickets to see your show, what would you advise they do during this spooky season? What are some of your other recommendations for things to do in Duluth in October? And so they have some tips as well. So you can read more about those in the feature.
Great stuff as always, Jay. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Dan.
And again, you can find Jay's article in Wednesday's print edition of the Duluth News Tribune. You can also find it online prior at duluthnewstribune.com. Wyatt, back to you.
Thanks, Dan. Now here's a look at your forecast, brought from the News Tribune's Northlandia podcast.
This weather forecast for the greater Duluth area today, generally cloudy and cool. High temps only in the upper 40s. Northwest wind around 10 miles an hour during the day. Mostly cloudy with light winds tonight, low down in the mid to upper 30s. And then for Wednesday, maybe a peak of sun with temps getting up to around 50, north winds around 5 to 10. Clouds thicken up on Thursday with a pretty good chance for some rain showers by Friday. I'm Storm Tracker record meteorologist John Wheeler.
Thank you to the Northlandia Podcast for their support. The weekly podcast explores curious and unique stories here in the Northland. The latest episode looks into some of the unique inventions to come out of Duluth. You can find that episode now on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you also get this podcast. Reporting for today's episode was done by Peter Passy, Tom Olson, and Jay Gabler. Thank you for listening to Duluth News Tribune Minute. Have a great day, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.